Good evening all, and welcome. Tonight's video has been graciously sponsored by Gaston Luga. You can see the bag on screen now is the one they sent me, and I absolutely love it. I think the design is really cool, it's really practical. Oh, and it comes with this passport holder that I also really like. That's where my passport lives now. If you'd like to get your hands on your very own, you can follow the link in the description to gastonluga.com and get a sweet 15% off all your purchases with the code Mortis15, which you can see on screen. It's also completely vegan and has free delivery and returns worldwide. I'll leave that info for you for your consideration. But for now, it's time to get comfortable. Prepare for the night shift ahead of us, and let the darkness take control. I work night shifts as a security officer in a very large office building who has to do 3 nightly patrols. There are 2 officers who sit at the same reception desk between patrols. We're the only people in the building after 10 PM. Anyway, the job itself is pretty simple. I walk around with a PDA scanning different checkpoints throughout the complex. Now for the creepy stuff. There is a particular part of the complex which I'll refer to as Building 1, where things just feel weird. The air is thick, and you have a constant feeling of being watched. I just put my earphones in and power through this part of my patrol, as nothing out of the ordinary other than feeling uneasy usually happens. A few nights ago, it was myself and another new start working, and we were both sat at the reception, chatting away, when we hear a really loud bang from right beside us. Imagine someone dropping a phone book from the top of a stepladder onto laminate flooring. We are both quite obviously shaken up, and look around for the source of the noise. We can't find any. Weird? Fast forward to the last night, and I'm working with a different guy who's been working there longer than I have. Same scenario. Both sitting around chatting away, and we hear this almighty bang, a lot louder than the previous time, coming from Building 1. We both jump and look at each other and say in unison, "What the hell was that?" I look over at the reception desk to the building, and the sensor lights are all off, meaning no one was out there. I call out, "Hello, is anyone there?" To which almost as soon as I called out, we both heard a quieter, more distant bang. I go to investigate the sound and find nothing that could have caused the noise. It's worth noting that we have monitored the CCTV, and upon checking back, we can conclude that there was definitely no one else in the building. So I can't rule out logical cause, because if it is some sort of paranormal experience, how would I get whatever it is to ease off a bit, so I don't have to feel unnerved every time I go to work? Or any way to cope with the feeling of unease? I've had paranormal experiences before, but not somewhere I have to visit regularly. Any advice would be appreciated. I'm a 23-year-old guy from the southern US. This happened while I was a night shift cashier at a rundown gas station at the end of summer in 2013, and I had just turned 19. The city I live in has about 10,000 people in it, so it's not a big place. I've lived here for most of my life. It's a decent place to raise a family, and pretty much the most boring place in the world, but the kind of place where, in the bad areas, bums, junkies and drunks run rampant. The gas station is in this kind of area. In my first week of working there, it became apparent that the few people I worked with were unreliable, and would seemingly quit out of nowhere. I quickly understood why. In the first 5 days alone, I ran off a woman trying to do heroin in the bathroom. I ran off some creep trying to pick up 2 13-year-olds, and I had more than a few detailed empty threats thrown my way by a couple of drunks that were on the no-sell list, which I would just laugh off. With that being said, I had grown accustomed to the type of dumbasses that shopped there from time to time. I got plenty used to it. After about a month of working there, and being the only employee worth their salt, I'd had to work on my own every now and then. I thought nothing of it really. It wasn't that bad. The store stayed empty for the most part. One particularly slow fall night, I noticed the silhouette of a tall, skinny man walking towards the store in the distance. I couldn't make out his features until he got closer. He was in his early 30s, unshaven, with stringy dark hair, a filthy grey hoodie, no shirt, black sweatpants, and unlaced boots. This guy gave me the chills. As he walked in the door next to the register, he silently glanced at me with a cold, dead, emotionless expression. Then quickly, he stared at the floor, shuffling along, browsing the 3 small aisles of snacks and cheap car accessories, and glancing up at me every few seconds. All in all, he stumbled around for 2 to 3 minutes, his hands deep in his hoodie pockets the entire time he was in the building. Then he quickly hurried out the side door and was gone. I assumed he'd stolen something to eat, and at that point I really didn't care. The guy was obviously high, and I wasn't about to get stabbed over a Twinkie. Not to mention that my manager had turned into a real arsehat, and I had thought of quitting, so take 2 more of them while you're at it. The very next day, I was scheduled on the 3 to 11 shift. The afternoon went surprisingly peacefully. A few old people, a couple of cute girls, and a guy in a suit in a hurry. Not many people came in that evening either, which wasn't a shocker, as it was getting pretty late, and I sure wasn't complaining. Then at around 10, once again, the only one in the store, I see the familiar tall, skinny silhouette out in the distance. The man from the previous day had come walking down the street, hand shoved in his pocket like he had a gun, heading towards the entrance. The bell on the door was the only sound in an otherwise completely silenced moment. For a few seconds he gave me that same dead stare, seemingly sizing me up, then went right back to business, browsing the aisles and glancing up at me. By this point, my adrenaline is pumping. I'm alone, and I'm wondering if he's armed, and what I'm going to do if he tries something. A few minutes later, he comes up to the counter, holding a small bottle of water and $2 between the fingers of his same hand, just staring at me. His right hand never left his hoodie pocket. I rang him up silently and handed him his change. He stood there for about 10 seconds staring at me. Then, in a very foreboding deep voice, says, "You need to call the police." My heart sank. "Excuse me?" "You need to call the police." Then, as quickly as he finished repeating himself, he walked out of the door and disappeared. Needless to say, I took that advice very quickly. I locked all the doors, went to the back, and called the police. A squad car eventually pulled up, and I gave my statement and went home. I quit not long after that, having finally had enough of my manager and all the crap that came along with that job. I think about those 2 nights a lot. I never heard from the police again, and I've never seen that man again, which is strange in a town where you recognize every face. The only conclusion I can come to is that he might have known someone that was planning something that night, and the cops scared them off. There was nobody around outside in the pitch black, and the store was completely empty except for me. What if he hadn't done what he did? Would someone have shoved a gun in my face over the money in the register? Or was someone simply looking for a life to take? Either way, moral of the story, don't judge a book by its cover. I have worked mostly night audit the entire time that I have worked at my hotel. So one night, I come in, and this old Vietnam vet that has been staying with us on and off over the past few years was at the desk chatting up my coworker. When she left him, and I got to bullshit and got him on the topic of those ghost shows that they show on the Travel Channel. I told him I believe there are probably paranormal things in this world, but I believe these shows are all lies. So eventually he goes upstairs, and I go back into the office. Here is where it gets weird. In the back office, we have a desk that is connected to the wall, with the security monitor and DVR on the right-hand side of the chair. We have 8 cameras in total that cover the entrances, guest computer, breakfast area, and the housekeeping laundry room. The laundry room that night had the lights turned off and the infrared sensors turned on. So I sit down at the desk and prop my phone up against the wall to watch some YouTube. Right as I set my phone down, I see a white object skirt the lower left-hand corner of the housekeeping/laundry room camera. Now remember, I had just got done talking with a guest about paranormal stuff, and my heart was instantly racing. So I jump up, leaving my phone at the desk, and rush across the hall into the laundry room. I fling that door open and hit the lights and half step into the room. I start yelling into the room, "Who the hell's in here?" I look around while keeping one hand on the door and not wanting to venture too far into the room. So I yell a few more times, "Who's in the room?" I wait and receive no answer. No one ever answered, but I got this funny feeling that someone was behind the door. And I kid you not, like straight out of the movies, I look behind the door, and there is this tall, lanky dude standing behind it, trying his damn hardest to impersonate the wall. I start yelling at him, "Who the hell are you and how the hell did you get in here?" He just stares at me at first, and after yelling at him a few more times, he tells me he was just trying to get out of the cold. It was October or November, but not cold outside. So I told him I didn't give a crap and demanded to know how he got in. He said that he came through the south entrance, so I told him to get the hell out of here. He asks which way he should go, and I told him the same way he got in. So he starts down the hall towards the south entrance, and when we get there, sure enough, the damn door is propped open with a small rock, and I told him to get out and kicked the rock away. So I get him out and go back and get my cell phone and call my general manager. She told me to check all the entrances, including the guest laundry. I double-checked everything and told her it was good. And since he was already gone, we didn't call the cops. Now originally, I thought the guy got in the way he said he did, through the south entrance, and had snuck into the laundry room before I saw him on the camera, and I busted him coming back out. Turns out that was wrong. The next day, the maintenance guy got to work and noticed a bunch of his tools were missing. Turns out the guy had jimmied the outside door to the sprinkler room, which serves as the maintenance office, and came into the building that way. The sprinkler room is connected to the housekeeping/laundry room, so I actually caught this guy coming further into the building, but after he had already rummaged through the sprinkler room and stolen tools. We also discovered that day the window to the guest laundry room, which is on the south end of the building near the door, that was propped open, was broken, and the screen was halfway pulled out. But due to a robbery earlier in the same year, we had barred the windows so that we're only open an inch or so. We figured he came back after I chased him out, and tried to get in that way, but couldn't because the window wouldn't open all the way, and I had checked the guest laundry room when I was on the phone with my general manager. But because the window wasn't busted when I checked it, I hadn't noticed the screen was pried halfway off. Needless to say, I am wary about telling ghost stories at work anymore, because this was the second time I had been talking about something spooky, and then something happens later that night. I'm also super paranoid about having the lights to the housekeeping/laundry room off anymore. In high school, I worked the 12-hour shift every Sunday at the corporate Conoco gas station, when Conoco was headquartered in Greenway Plaza in Houston, 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. The station was at Highway 59 and Wesleyan. I worked with a friend from school. 2 other guys worked a 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. shift that partially overlapped. We were a full service station. This also gave the full-time workers Sundays off. One of the other guys from high school, Billy, worked some of the week's night shifts with a full-time night worker named Jim. He complained that Jim made him do all the work while Jim turned tricks in the parking lot. When we asked Jim about it, he admitted he had some admirers. So one day we get a phone call from the gas station manager, and he tells us that Jim has been murdered at the gas station, and the police would like to question all of the workers. My mother is freaked before we even meet the cops. However, the meeting is called off because Billy confessed. He and another student hatched a plan to rob the safe. While Jim was busy, they tried to open the safe, but they can't. The other kid needs his share, so when Jim comes into the station, they jump him and tell him to open the safe. Jim says he can't, that the combination's been changed. So they take Jim to the garage bay, tie him up, and beat him to try and get the safe open. They work on Jim for over an hour before the other kid loses his temper and cuts Jim's throat. Both are arrested and charged with capital murder. The garage bay was a horrid mess, and the mechanic starts saying they can hear moaning noises. We had to quit our jobs, and I went to work at an AMC movie theater. Business dropped off at the gas station, and Conoco moved its headquarters to I-10 West. The station closed and was torn down, and after a few years a new Chevron station was built in its place. A couple of years ago I stopped to get gas at the Chevron. The guy behind the bulletproof glass wasn't too busy, and I told him I used to work at this location in the old days. He looked even more bored, and I asked him if he or the other workers had ever heard any noises in the back area. He perked up and asked, "What do you mean exactly?" "Like unexplained sounds," I say. He then looks at me and says, "Some of the guys say they hear a moaning noise, and someone saying help in a whisper." I told him that that was the murdered guy, Jim. One night, I was working a night shift in a refinery. I was working as a hole watch for my shift, which means I basically sit at an entrance and document anyone that goes in and out. Well, a guy showed up. I got his name and he gave me the company he worked for, so I logged him in. Everything checked out. So I'm waiting at the entrance for a few hours and the guy comes out. Now, that's nothing unusual, because most of the people that go in will stay there for 2 to 6 hours at a time, and every hour or two, I yell up to make sure they're okay. I would yell, and usually the guys whistle back or make a noise to let me know everything's okay, and every time I check, I thought I heard a response. Later, a few more guys come up and go in. I log them in and let them know there's another man up there doing some inspections. They go in and radio back, "Hey, there's no one in here." I immediately got a weird feeling, because I was the only entrance/exit, and there's no possible way to escape the container without me knowing. The way the container is set up is that you have to climb a ladder right up in from underneath using a scaffolding to help. I was sitting on the scaffolding far back enough to where if anyone came out, they would drop right down in front of me, and the only way off it was through the gate opening that I was guarding. So I radioed my foreman and explained to him what's going on. He got in contact with the company, and they had no one by that name, and no one scheduled to check that particular container. I was completely baffled at this point. Here I am, adamant as ever that someone went up into the container. I thought I was going crazy, and I was also a little weirded out. I had a signature on the log where they sign, and I have to sign right next to their name, acknowledging that I know that they were going in. For about 20 minutes I'm in full panic mode and freaking out, because I don't have any explanation as to what happened, or where he went or who he was, and to top it all off, I could have easily lost my job because of it. I work overnight in a hotel at the front desk, running the night audit. Now, I've always been a skeptic to anything religious or paranormal, but I've always found a bit of interest in the possibilities of what if. And B, I haven't seen or experienced anything really weird or unbelievable myself. 95% of my time is spent in the lobby, but I have heard many co-workers who have claimed to have seen things over the years. Most of them have worked in security or back of the house operations. My hotel is an older hotel in a downtown metropolis. We are in a skyscraper with over 20 floors above ground and several below. We have several ballrooms and event spaces. Our grand ballroom is 2 levels below street level. We have another ballroom and several event rooms on our 2nd floor just above the lobby. We have meeting rooms on our 3rd floor, and our top floor is all banquet/event space. Guest rooms start on the 4th floor and go all the way to the 2nd highest floor, which again is purely event space. Overnight, these event areas lie dormant and dark, but are routinely patrolled throughout the night by our security staff, who are mostly just making sure that guests haven't gotten lost, or that a homeless person hasn't snuck into one of these spaces and set up camp, which does happen occasionally. Mostly though, there's nothing. Well, mostly nothing. And here we find the creepy things that can't be explained. Almost every security guard has been uncomfortable walking around on the 3rd floor alone at night, as opposed to any other floor in the hotel. With it being strictly meeting rooms, there are no guests after hours on this floor, and it is very quiet. The hall lights on this floor are always on regardless. Still, numerous security guards over the years have talked about feeling like they were being watched on this floor, and are overcome with a feeling of not wanting to be there. And a few of them have reported experiencing the same phenomenon of hearing a little girl's laughter, or seeing what looked like a little girl just out of the corner of their eye. This little girl spirit, who has been identified by different employees over the years, even ones who haven't worked together. But then there is also another presence that lingers on the 3rd floor and gives them a sense of dread. Then there's the north stairwell. We have 2 stairwells in the building, one on the north side and one on the south. These are most commonly used for fire evacuation, or employees, or the occasional guest who'd rather get a good workout than take the elevator. Anyway, there's an urban legend surrounding the north stairwell. Legend has it that decades ago, when the hotel was young, a little boy fell from the stairwell from the top floor and died. Since then, I've heard reports from security, housekeepers, banquet people, all sorts, about hearing a little boy running and playing in the stairwell, and then finding that there's no one there. Chalk it up to a ghost or overactive imaginations, but if there is a record of said death, I haven't seen it. Still, many people have claimed to have had the same experience, even guests. Then there is the case of the shadow person on the top floor. A couple of years ago, we had this security guard who didn't believe in anything he couldn't see, but he had an experience on the top floor that freaked him out so badly, he never returned. He was pale as a sheet and in a cold sweat. When he does his patrols, he would normally keep the lights off and shine a flashlight at anyone he may have found, usually a homeless person who had snuck in for a quick nap, in order to disorient them and gain the upper hand. He had pretty good vision in the dark and a great sense of the layout of things, even in the inky blackness. So anyway, he's on his patrol on the top floor one night. The lights are out, and he sees a clear outline of someone standing in front of the window on the far side of the room, silhouetted against the lights from the city against the skyline. He decides he's going to sneak up quietly on this person, then quickly turn the flashlight on to surprise them. He's watching the person closely, and can make out the unmistakable human shape of them. Solid, impermeable, firm. When he's about 15 feet away, he quickly turns on his flashlight. But as the beam hits where the person was supposed to be, there's nothing. Just a reflection of the flashlight in the window. Dust in the air, and nothing more. Confused, he looks around, shining his light this way and that. But no one is there. The room is empty. He turns the light off. The shape that was in front of the window is gone. He walks over to where it was and takes a moment to look out over the city confused, thinking that his imagination must have been playing tricks on him. But at the same time, he also felt like he was being watched and had a feeling of slight dread wash over him that made the hairs on the back of his neck prickle up. He turned around back to the door and was instantly shocked again. It should have been closed, but there again was the shadow of a person, only solid, and this time he saw eyes glowing red, looking at him. He was frozen for a moment and watched as the figure slowly and silently backed out of the room and closed the door. That's when my security guard noped out of there, hopped on the elevator, came back down to the lobby to tell me what happened, and my other desk agent and my bellman. We'd never seen him like this before, and he swore that he was telling the truth. So we took turns going up to investigate for ourselves. Granted, it was creepy up there with all the lights out, and we did feel uncomfortable, like we were being watched. Maybe it was just our imaginations running wild because we were expecting to see something. Or perhaps he was right, and there was something vicious up there. Who knows? After that night though, he was always reluctant to do his rounds, and did so with the lights on. That's his story. Finally, ghost calls. Now this is something that I personally have experienced, though it could easily be dismissed as faulty wiring or crossed connections in the phone line. Who knows? It's an old building that's undergone numerous renovations. there's bound to be a few electrical quirks here and there. Anyway, every call to the hotel comes through BPX, our phone operator. The operator is tucked away in a room in the back of the house, just behind the front office. A front desk team member will cover BPX when the operator needs to go on break, so I take over back there frequently during these times, since there are 2 of us at the front desk. That way, we still have coverage at the desk and on the phones at all times. We are a fairly large hotel. Overnight, we don't get as many calls as during the day, but they do come through. Most calls are set as wake-up calls, our guest inquiries about the hotel or the city, maybe even late-night dining options. Then there's the occasional person who wants to make a reservation at 3 AM or speak to the front desk, who we patch through. And then there are the ghost calls. We call them the ghost calls because there's no one there making the call. The room just calls. And there are a handful of specific rooms that make ghost calls to BPX, and occasionally to the front desk also. But mostly it's just to BPX. What happens is the operator gets a call from one of those rooms, and all they hear is either silence or just static for a period of time, before an eventual disconnect. But it's not just one call. The calls will come sporadically for hours sometimes. Usually it's only one room calling over and over, seemingly at a whim, sometimes 2. But it's always one of the regular ghost rooms. I know them by heart by now. The calls will come whether the room is occupied or vacant, but even if the room is occupied, it's not the guest making the call. One night, a long time ago, a new operator got his first ghost call on BPX, got a long bit of silence before hearing the click, and wanted to make sure the guest was okay. So the operator called the room back, and the guest answered. The operator had asked the guest if they had tried to call, but the guest, who hadn't touched the phone at all during their stay, until just when the operator called, said that they had not. The operator apologized for disturbing them, assuming they got the wrong number, and hung up. A few minutes later, that same room was calling, but it wasn't the guest. It was a ghost call. You get the idea. Normally the phone won't work if the room is vacant and not checked in. But for whatever reason, the ghost rooms will call whenever they please. Sometimes we go months without ghost calls. Then all of a sudden, a room will be active for a night or a few days, then back to business as usual. Almost everyone who's worked the phones has received their fair share of ghost calls. Engineering has checked and rechecked the phone system and the wiring, and everything appears to be normal. We're stumped as to why this happens, and while there is probably a rational explanation for it, I would say that it is still under the category of creepy and unexplainable. And yes, guests do occasionally pass away in hotel rooms. And no, I don't know if these rooms specifically have been rooms that guests have passed away in. Make your own connections. Old hotels are full of stories. They're ripe for urban legends and myths. Whether or not there is anything to those stories is another matter, but some are definitely creepy and unexplainable. Just because you can't rationalize something doesn't mean there isn't a rational explanation for it. But honestly, where's the fun in that? Sometimes it's just fun to let yourself believe for a moment that something could possibly be, and roll with it. If anything, it makes for a good story. This happened to a friend. Let me take you back to fall of 2010, my freshman year of college. I went away to a small university in Iowa that was supposedly the oldest college in the state, but I never looked into that claim, so I can't say for sure if it was. I, like most college-aged kids, got into the party scene quickly, and the second or third weekend there, I was caught drinking underage. Because I was one of the first students busted for drinking, the school wanted to make an example of me with their punishment. Usually you had to pay a small fine, but I had to do what they called community service. The punishment turned out to be more of an embarrassment, because I had to sit in the lobby of my dorm building one Saturday night with one of the security guards of my school, so my peers would see me as they went out for the night. For the sake of the story, I'll call the security guard Terry. He was the same guy who busted me for drinking, so at first things were a little awkward between us, but he seemed like a decent guy once we started talking. Terry told me he used to be a state trooper, but decided he didn't like the danger that came with the job, and decided to take the night shift at the college as overnight security, which he had been doing for the last decade. Like I mentioned, this was a very old university that looked a bit like Hogwarts, because there were older buildings on campus that had their own urban legends of ghost sightings and unexplained noises. I didn't buy into ghost stories, so I didn't care nor investigate those claims. When Terry told me he had been at the school for a while, I asked him what was the weirdest thing he encountered on the campus. I thought maybe catching students being stupid or harmless encounters, but he told me something much more twisted. He stiffened up a little, put down his coffee cup, and looked away. I thought maybe he was joking with me, so I kind of chuckled, but the look he shot me was one of dread. He finally relaxed and began to tell me one of the scariest, weirdest stories I have ever heard. Terry's encounter took place during the second year of his job as night security guard on campus. The year before, one of the buildings on campus that served as part of the administrative offices and part dormitory had been closed for renovations. The building, Kaufman Hall, opened back up, and the school decided to keep it as offices only and build another dorm on campus. The dorm rooms were abandoned and the top floor locked to prevent students from going up there and vandalizing the place. About halfway through the first semester that year, a student had gone missing. Her friends had reported it first to the school before they called the police, because they were hoping she was just on campus and didn't try to make a big deal out of it. The daytime security crew couldn't find her, so when nighttime rolled in, Terry was asked to look for her. He urged the school to call the police, but they said they wouldn't until the following morning. Terry searched the different buildings on campus, other dorms, and pretty much everywhere imaginable. As he was walking up the hill to the top of campus, he saw one of the lights on in Kaufman Hall, the same floor that was locked up a few months ago. Terry decided he needed to check there to make sure that the girl wasn't hiding in one of the empty dorm rooms. So he went to the building's front door and noticed the doors were wide open, which was odd because it was late at night and all offices were closed. He didn't feel uneasy at this point, just confused. He began his ascent to the top floor of the building, and on the landing past the fourth story, he stopped to catch his breath. He suddenly heard on the next floor a door slamming shut. He slowly crept up the stairs and came to the door that was locked that led to the hallway of the old dorm. He tried the door, but it was locked. He wondered how that could be if he saw the light on earlier, and now the door slammed closed. He took out his key that he had on his chain, with the various keys for the school, and opened the door. He peeked his head in, and then noticed there were no lights on down the hallway that he could see, so he began to slowly walk to the other side of the top floor. As he did, he began to look in each of the rooms to see if the missing girl was in one of them. As he walked into one room, he heard footsteps down the hallway, but as Terry re-entered the long hallway, no one was there. He called out the girl's name, but just heard dead silence. Right as he began to walk further into the hall, he heard someone laughing, but not a college-aged girl, an adult man. Terry called out again if anyone was up in the dorm hall with him. As he did, a tall man entered the hall at the opposite side of him, dressed in black, but too dark to see his face. Terry called out again, asking why he was up there, but the man came running down towards him at full speed while screaming his head off. Terry was able to quickly sprint out of the dorm, shutting and locking the door behind him. As he took a few steps down the stairs to leave Kaufman Hall, he heard the most bone-chilling laugh coming from behind the door. Terry rushed out to the security office on campus and called the police. When they arrived, they made their way to the top of Kaufman. The door to the hall he had witnessed the intruder was wide open, and no one was found. The only thing there was an old cot with some dirty blankets. The college put in new locks and hoped the intruder, who obviously had a key, would not attempt to get in again. Terry didn't care, as he would never go back up there. The next morning, the girl was found, and to be honest, for the dumbest reason. She got into a fight with her roommates and decided to go spend the weekend with her boyfriend at another college. Terry was happy the girl was back, but in a way angry she hadn't told her friend she was gone, as it could have prevented him from having that whole encounter. I was in shock after hearing that story, so I could imagine what he had gone through. Terry switched the subject to sports or something, and we never spoke of it again. I would see Terry all the time that year, and he and I became pretty friendly with each other, but the conversation was always about sports or news, never about the story he told me. The summertime came, and I went back home for the summer. At that point, Terry had gone back to being a state trooper, so I didn't see him again until a few years later when I was in a restaurant with some friends. He was there with his family, but he was nice enough to come up to my table and say hi. At this point, my friends had all heard the story, but never met Terry, so I introduced them as the guy who told me the tale. One of my friends asked if they ever caught the guy, to which Terry shook his head, but he did have one theory. One of the top administrators at the college, he didn't say who, had a son who had spent most of his teenage and early adult years in a mental institution. Around the time of Terry's encounter, the son was brought back to his family's house and would come and go as he pleased, never explaining where he went or what he did. He would be gone for days at a time, and Terry always wondered if he somehow gained access to Kaufman Hall and spent his time away from home there. The man who potentially could have been the dark figure in the dorm went back to the institution as he continued to run away. It's an interesting theory, but who knows if it's true. All I know is that Terry was lucky to get out of that dorm as fast as he did. Back when I was in high school, I got a job at the McDonald's down the road from my house. It was the only place that called me back and I needed a job. My father was a single dad who, due to failing eyesight, was on disability, and we weren't able to make ends meet if I didn't work. I ended up leaving school and working full-time at my job, quickly working my way up to a manager. After working 6 months during the normal morning and night shifts, they asked me if I could switch to third shift, which was 8 or 9 at night to 4 or 5 in the morning. I said yes, as it came with $1 raise, and I had just turned 18. The switch wasn't too bad. It took a few weeks to get on the new sleep cycle. I'm not even going to lie, to be honest, but I enjoyed the sunrise on my walk home, as it usually took me about 20 minutes to get to my store, as traffic wasn't so bad on the 8-lane boulevard it sat on, so about a 6-minute drive, I suppose. I normally walked, but tried to take rides from friends when I could, because I used to get catcalled and hit on a regular basis, and the men in my area are not the greatest, so it freaked me out to no end. One night, I had a guy come through the drive-thru at around 1 a.m. I opened the window telling him we were waiting on his order, and he started aggressively hitting on me, asking me where I lived and what time I got off, if I wanted to do something with him when I got off. Obviously no. At one point, he asked if I had a boyfriend. I told him yes, and he proceeded to ask me back to his place after work, and that my boyfriend didn't have to know. I was so relieved when I handed him his food and shut the window, walking to my cashier and asking him to see if he pulled away. He does, and I go through the rest of my night fairly normal. 4 a.m. rolls around, and the morning manager rolls in as I'm auditing the safe, relieving me for the day. I grab food and bullshit outside with the morning manager while we smoked a cig. Someone pulled up to the drive-thru, and she tossed me a cig for my walk home and ran in. So I just put my headphones on and started to walk home. I crossed the aforementioned main road and headed down this road that ran parallel to the highway. The highway is on the left, and there are a few buildings on the right, but most of them are empty offices at night. There are some houses at the end of the curve closer to my neighborhood, but for the most part there are no people. As I'm walking, I can see headlights coming up. I think it's just a car driving by, but after a minute I realize that the car should have passed. I gaze up to my left and see that this car is keeping speed with me. I take out my headphones, and it's the same dude. He asked me if I wanted to go get high with him back at his place, and he got really pushy. I start to power walk away, and he ends up driving ahead and pulling his car up in front of me, blocking my path. He asked me if I was sure I didn't want to ride. I told him no, and to piss off, and he noped the hell out of there while I was calling my boyfriend. I ended up switching back to morning shifts shortly after, and carrying a knife in my bag with me at all times. I work at a video store. Yes, those still exist in Canada. So I work mostly evening/night shift. The store is located in a pretty calm neighborhood. Nothing special. Usual suburb. I live really near and don't own a car, so I walk down to my house, and it takes about 20 minutes or so. The last shift's walk was a little bit special. Creepy, I would say. I finish at about 11, lock the door, say goodbye to my co-worker and start my journey home, alone. About 5 minutes later, at the first intersection, I saw them. A woman and a little boy were roughly 30 feet away from me, coming from the other street. But something was wrong. The woman was walking backwards, dragging the little boy under the armpits with his boots in the snow. The scene sent a chill down my spine and made me stop. The woman saw me and immediately said, "Oh, don't worry, he's okay. He's just sleepwalking." And then she proceeded to explain that it was kind of a night terror, and that the fresh air helps him relax. The only way he would stop screaming, "I'm falling," was to keep him in contact with the ground at all times. That's why she was dragging him like so. Anyhow, I continued my walk. I was looking back to see if they were following me. I'm not easily scared, but I have to admit that this walk home was a little bit longer than usual. The worst part is, if I see them again, this would be the only thing validating the story of the woman. Otherwise, I'll never know if she was just lying to me. I worked as a night auditor for a New Brampton in one of the safest areas near me for a little over 2 years now. It's got direct access to 2 main highways. I've had my fair share of creepy guests and weirdos, but most were easy check-ins and fixes, and they were on their way. However, last night changed everything. As safe as my property is, we do have a shady $40 a night motel on either side of our building. There's been some stuff that's gone down at both places, and occasionally their guests try to sneak into our hotel for a free breakfast. I have had on 2 occasions seen the police raid both hotels and spend all night searching for people who ran and collecting evidence, I presume. It's been a while since I've had such entertainment though. So anyway, it's about 2:30 AM and I'm getting ready to run my night audit. My doors are always locked, and this guy who is dirty, but in a construction worker kind of way, walks up. We have plenty of construction workers stay here, as we aren't far from their site, and we're rated number 1 in the area. So I open the door for him and ask if he needs a room before I run the audit. He grins at me, but it's anything but a warm welcome. It looks fake and almost threatening. He looks at me for a second and I say, "I have a guest in room 114. He looks at me for a second and says, "I have a guest in room 114. His wording caught me off guard. Not many say they have a guest in a room. It's usually, "I'm here for la la la," or "I'm meeting blah blah blah." The second issue is that we don't have a room 114, and neither do any of the same brand names in my area. I've been to all the intermediate ones, so I inform him that we don't have that room. He looks at me for a second and says, "Ah, shucks, guess I got stood up," giggles and walks out the door. Thinking this is very odd, but whatever, I go back to running the audit. As I'm finishing up, the phone rings. A guy starts chuckling and says that there's a car in your parking lot with its lights on. And oh, by the way, I'm the guy that just got stood up. Now 1, it's been half hour since he walked out the door, and why is he still in the parking lot? And 2, nobody has come or gone since him, and there were no lights on in the parking lot when he arrived. 3, why do I need to know that you're the guy that got stood up? I brush it off as odd, but my gut is telling me that something strange is afoot. I wait about 5 minutes, and then walk around the front of the building from the inside, and see no cars in my parking lot with lights on. It's not very well lit, so it would be easy to spot. I go back to the front desk, and wait for the audit team to finish up, so that I can get ready to start breakfast, and the phone rings again. I pick it up, and it's Creepy Guy telling me yet again that there are lights on in the parking lot. It's been at least another 20 minutes since his previous call. So again, why would he still be in my parking lot? I feel like I may have missed something between the windows, so I go to my locker door, peek my head out really quick, do a swift scan of the lot, and my eye catches someone standing in the corner. It's Creepy Guy, and he's watching me. There's also no car with its lights on. I run back inside, double check that the doors are locked, and that's when I start to feel this sense of panic that something really bad is about to happen. I have never felt this feeling while on my shift, and only once before in my life, and let's just say I have physical scars from when that happened last time. I get back out to the front desk, and I call the local police department, explain the situation to dispatch, and ask if it's ever happened before. I tell them no, but also inform them that I'm the only employee on the property, and would like for them to scan the parking lot, and to check in with me if possible. The police pulls up, and wants to get a description from me before searching the area. Well, as he's getting out of the car, he notices movement. The creepy guy took off. The cop walks in, a little nervous, and tells me what he'd just seen while using his radio for calling assistance. 3 more show up, and they discuss it, search my parking lot and the 2 neighboring parking lots, and they seem to come up with nothing, but stick around to patrol the parking lot until the sun came up. Police has stopped by only once since my shift started tonight to check in with me, and said that they would be in my area if I needed anything. While here, they told me that a total of 3 guys fled the parking lot from different directions last night. He believed the creepy guy was trying to lure me in there, away from the doors, so I would end up trapped between the 3 of them. He didn't go much further as to what could have happened from there, and I honestly don't want to dwell on it. I am a water treatment plant operator. I've been doing this job for about a decade. I've been the night shift guy my whole career. The nights are normally quiet, and can be boring if everything is going to plan. My plant has a few different builds. The oldest is 60 or so years old. The main building I spend a majority of the shift in is only about 20 years old. For more backstory of the area, this used to be a booming, energized area. This area was littered with railroad tracks and drifters coming in and out on the trains of yesteryear. Our farms and factories were very bountiful back then. Now that you all understand that, you must also understand that with success in the area, there is also darkness. From the settling of the area, wars with natives, and even in the 30s and 40s of people being killed in train wrecks and bad business deals, the ground is laced with it. This silence of the night shift can be eerie all on its own. Lots of bumps and bangs in the dimly lit darkness. On the night I'm about to speak about, everything started off as normal. I came in around sunset, got the nightly Passover, and began my work. Around midnight, I had to do my rounds around the property while getting the nightly pump numbers. I made my rounds with nothing but a flashlight around the main building. The oldest building is a good walking distance away from the main one. I sat out in the dark, heading for that building. I must also add that we aren't in the nicest area of town. However, I'm a big guy and can hold my own. As I made my walk, I got an uneasy feeling. I had gotten them before, but I have a job to do, and nothing came out of it. I rounded the corner and unlocked the door. As I did, the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I have a job to do though, so I opened the door, and there, in the darkness, stood nothing. I walked in and proceeded to get my numbers, and as I turned to shut the door, I looked up down the hallway to see a woman in pure white look at me through the other door. I almost jumped out my boots and peed myself a little. I fell backwards as I came back to reality, and once again made eye contact with this entity. As I met her gaze, everything in me said, "Hey, your life's in danger." Her face distorted and started to shift around. I was now frozen as she shifted into what looked like an Indian warrior. Her eyes were glowing, As I got to my feet, she had shifted into this huge wolf creature. The growls were chilling to say the least. It snarled, then ran towards me. I had no time to even shut the door. I ran as fast as I could, screaming bloody murder. I felt like it was trying to bite my backside. I got a hold of my pant leg and swore it tore it to shreds. I stumbled and rolled, but somehow managed to make it onto my feet. I darted into the main building, and as I shut the door, I felt a hard thud on the other side. I locked the doors and ducked down inside. I could hear the thing casing the building, growling and scratching at the walls. I got the courage to look out the window, and just ended up face to face with the white lady again. I had the police come and sit with me until the sun came up. No one else has seen the white lady since. It's still quite freaky, but I do have a job to do. I've worked at this 115-room hotel for a few years now, and a number of employees, myself included, have had experiences centered around the continually defunct hotel restaurant. Several people, both from our housekeeping and others who have tried opening businesses there, have reported hearing a girl's voice trying to get their attention when they're back in the kitchen area. One maid, back when we used to have part of the restaurant to prep the continental breakfast, mentioned seeing a girl in her late teens/early 20s, dressed in white, walking past her into an adjoining room. When she turned to tell the girl that we weren't open yet, the girl had vanished. A large 3x4-inch painting in the dining room area had a tendency to lift up and off the two large hooks it was hung on and end up in the middle of the floor. This happened a half a dozen times before I removed the painting and tossed it into the storage room. I'm not fond of having to investigate loud crashing sounds in the middle of the night, you see. Once, and thankfully only once, I had a can of soda start to slowly slide down a long counter towards me while I was reading in a side office. I remember being completely frozen for a moment, not breathing, not moving an inch, while it scraped its way across the laminate countertop. It travelled several feet before I finally jumped from my chair and snatched it off the counter, yelling out, "Knock it off!" This particular encounter happened a few weeks ago. It had been an extremely slow night, and I'd been browsing on my laptop in the back office when I heard the front desk bell ring. We keep the lobby open 24 hours, so it wasn't terribly unusual to still get a guest arriving at 3 a.m. It took me a few seconds to walk to the front, but as I stepped out, I was surprised to see the lobby was completely vacant. Now, the lobby door makes a particular metal scraping sound when they open and close, and I hadn't heard someone pass through them. I could dismiss not hearing the sound of a person entering the lobby before the bell rang, because I hadn't been paying attention, but there was no way I could have missed the sound of them exiting as I walked to the front. In fact, aside from the low-volume classical music being played over the muzak, the lobby was completely silent. Curious and confused, I walked back into the office and replayed the security footage to see if I could find out where the guest had gone. This is from the surveillance cameras above the front desk, aimed towards the back of the lobby. Just out of the frame to the right is the entrance to the restaurant area. The doors are always kept locked. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I love night shift stories. They are definitely some of my favourites. I think I say that about a lot of topics, but I really do. Whenever I'm going to read night shifts, I'm like, oh, these are so good. That's why I made this video extra long. Let's be honest, I knew you guys were going to vote for longer stories. Who wouldn't want longer stories? I wanted the longer video. If you'd have asked for the shorter video, of course it would have been 40 minutes, but you wanted longer and I gave you longer. Oh, night shifts are so creepy. Oh, best stories. I've considered getting a job in the night shift. I wouldn't, but I'd considered before, like, wow, I could just get a job on the night shift and experience something creepy and maybe edit my videos while I'm working, but that doesn't work, does it? Still, if any of you have ever experienced anything creepy and would like to share it, even if it's not night shift related, you can drop it in my Reddit or send it to my email. I love reading your stories. If you like the video, you can drop a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. That's really nice. And if you're new here and you've listened to the end, you're amazing. You should probably subscribe and press the bell icon because there is new content every night. That's right, every night, nearly. Yeah, so I hope that you stick around. But anyway, that being said, I'm going to sign off now. Stay awesome. No, I said that wrong. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.